All right. So this is the regularly scheduled Town of Nantucket Board of Appeals meeting, Tuesday, October 13, 2016. Can I get an approval of the agenda as written, amended, etc.? Yeah? You make that motion? Susan makes the motion. Michael seconds it. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. That was unanimous, and even though I didn't hear much. How about the minutes of September 20th, 2016? I looked at them, looked okay to me. Did anybody have any comment about them? No? Michael? No? No? Susan makes a motion to approve as written. You want to second that one as well, Michael? Sure. Michael seconds it. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. So, we are on to I actually don't have it. I have what I think is the agenda.
It's on the packet.
Yeah. So, Rugged Scott, 05103 Rugged Scott LLC, release of lots 2 and 3 from the covenant. Do you want to? Is someone here for that?
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
Haley for the applicant. We're asking for 2 more lots to be released. That would leave 9 buildable lots remaining. The security to completion. Element is seeking a lengthy summary of COs versus and building permits for affordables versus non-affordables, and we are still on track with requirements of special permit.
Okay. Yep. I mean, again, you're monitoring that closely.
Yes.
And you're proceeding apace. So, as Eleanor said, the issuance of the COs is the control at the end. So, does anybody have a question for Mary Ann? No? All right. So, will someone make a motion to grant the relief as requested?
I will.
Susan makes the motion. All right, so who wants to second that? Michael? Does anybody else in the audience want to talk about this one? No. Okay, so the 5 members, we'll let Kieran catch up. So the 5 voting members would be from Jeffrey, Michael, Edward, Susan, Mark. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous. I think
I'm not. I didn't vote on it.
you did vote on it. You didn't vote on it? I asked you to vote on
Oh,
it.
you did?
Yeah.
I thought you looked at Jeff, because he said aye.
Yes.
Well, Jeff, Jeff, I was giving Kieran a chance. Let's
That's a real
revote.
super majority when you get 6.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Now it's unanimous. Go ahead.
Now you can sign it. If you just pass it down.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. We'll just let the signing take place and then move on.
No, I'll give you one. You're gonna Thank you.
Okay. I believe Jim was on this next one, so we're just going to let him power up. I signed. I'm on the top.
I signed.
Michael got up.
Oh, okay.
He's right there.
Right there.
Okay. I'm not on this next one, but I talked to the ethics commission, so they've asked us to leave the room. They don't really want us in the audience.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we're on 2016 Gerald T. Vento and Margaret Vento, trustees of 91 Low Beach Road Nominee Trust for the applicant.
So who is my board? These 5? Is that 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sitting in for Lisa.
So I apologize for the information. It's just an estimate from the contractor. You are welcome to read it, but I don't really recommend it. So just to give you the 2-second refreshment on this, the property in question is a 3-acre property out on Low Beach Road, the heavily wooded area. It abuts conservation land and has an abutted the property on the side where the tennis court is, also has a tennis court. So if you were to go through the 60 feet of brush, 30 feet or so on my client's side and 30 feet or so on the other client's side, and then get to the next thing, it's another tennis court. So in terms of who's being affected by this, not much. Both of the houses on my client's property and on the other property are substantially south, I think, or north, or whatever direction towards the water is. The tennis court was installed as close as much as 2 feet within the rear yard setback and 4.6 feet in the side yard setback. And as best we can tell, what happened was it was installed in 2012, and the contractor was working from stakes that were put in by Jeff Blackwell, not for this project, I want to be very clear, but for some Concom work that was done. They marked the corners of the lot, and the major problem that we have is that the lot line angles, and we think that the contractor did not account for that. So you see the tennis court sort of, cockeyed with the lot line, creating the encroachment. It's not fully over the side. It goes at an angle. The bylaw provides that this does not need a variance. This qualifies for a special permit, and I would ask that you grant that special permit. And at the last meeting, you asked me to get some substantiation of what the cost of doing this would be, and also I believe the chairman asked for some identification of how much of the court was sort of the excess overflow compared to the painted lines of the playing area. And so the court itself has a 12-foot perimeter going around it. And if you were to read through the materials, you would find that 12 feet is the minimum recommendation, with a caveat that 10 foot is considered to be the reduction if the reduction is needed, and that's for safety purposes. Essentially, when you're running and swinging a tennis court, being closer than 10 foot to the fence is considered to be unsafe, which I think is fairly obvious. So, from the point of view of could you cut 5 feet off one side and 2 feet off the other, not really. And so what we've seen is that the cost of moving the court is fairly substantial, because it's not just a matter of shaving here and adding there. That it would be about $30,000 in site work and landscaping and irrigation and those kind of things, and $95,000 to remove the court and then put in the new court. You can't really cut and paste with these kind of things. It would require moving the nets. It would require all kinds of things. You can't just sort of peel off the paint and whatever. So there's a very, very substantial cost in doing this, and very minimum impact by the encroachment. And as I stated, the bylaw provides for the special permit for these exact kind of situations, and I would ask that you grant that relief.
Okay. What is the specific Eleanor, you noted a bylaw in here that talked about, let me find it.
On page 5 of the packet?
Yeah.
That's 1662.
I mean, but it goes on to say, and if the intruding structure was so cited after 1990, the citing of the structure was reasonably based upon a licensed survey. So how do you meet that criteria?
The contractor was working from a survey that was done and stakes that were installed for wetland work. It was not, the court itself was not pinned. Then the question becomes, essentially, I think you're asking me, was it reasonable for the contractor to work up of those stakes? And I think it was, although clearly he did a poor job with it, which is the unintentional intrusion.
I don't think that's the, again, we get to the point where I don't think that's the intent of the bylaw. I think the intent is the surveyor made a mistake, and therefore you relied on the licensed survey. I don't think the intent was to take some survey and then do whatever the hell you want and say I relied on that.
I
So.
think that the problem is that it is not actually mathematically correct for people to go out and use tape measures to go off the surveys, but most people don't actually understand that you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't take a tape measure and go from your stakes. That it's more complicated than that. But that's how we end up in this situation. And frankly, I think that the bylaw can be applied wider than it was intended, which I think is your point of.
Well, it's not my point
Right,
that it should be. My point is that you're widening the scope a bit.
Well, what I'm asking for is not outside the common application of that bylaw. Because if everybody had their properties pinned and were going off the survey, you would see much, much less of these than you actually do. It would be, sort of nearly impossible for people to make that kind of mistake if they had all the properties.
It's happened. And again, I don't think that was the intent. The intent was that the surveyor made a mistake. You relied on that surveyor who was a licensed professional, and therefore you shouldn't be held to task as the owner. That's my interpretation of the bylaw. Not that, again, you took a plan, took a tape, and winged it, for lack of a better word. But having said that, does anybody have any other strong feelings about this one?
Oh, I just have a question for Steve.
Sure.
Steve, in the definition of structure, game courts fall into that category. And if I'm reading this document correctly, there was no building permit ever pulled for the construction of this court. Is that correct?
There was no building permit pulled at the time.
Okay.
It has since been pulled and verified, and it has agency approval. And we obviously need the zoning relief to close it out.
So is this being held up in Marcus's office? at this point
Yeah,
in time?
that's exactly right. And I guess for the record, I should also say that in the alternative, we're seeking variance relief for the encroachment based on the idea that the cost of fixing it compared to the impact is an undue burden. And again, I think we make that case pretty well here because it's so expensive and such a minimal thing, but I think that it would be better for the board not to grant variances and to grant special permit relief if that's available. And I guess some examples of this are that, this board sort of regularly grants, not regularly, but has granted permits for pools where people have done this. I had one this summer where the client sort of measured off and then they ended up 18 inches in the setback, and moving the pool seemed a little crazy. The other thing is that game courts are sort of funny because a fence doesn't count as a setback for zoning purposes, and a stone or paved surface doesn't count as a setback for zoning purposes. Only like a wooden deck counts, but stone or paving is considered to be a landscaping feature. But when you put them together, suddenly it's a game court and it counts for zoning purposes, which is a question. I can see the case for it, but there's really no impact on the neighbors one way or the other in this situation.
So Steve, just to summarize what's going on here and clarify, Fair Play, the one that turned in this estimate,
Yes.
is the one that put the court in 2012. And does this guy have insurance for when he messes things up?
I would hope so, but he's not on mine. I haven't looked into that.
Okay, and you're saying he's done a few of these on island?
He has done work here. He came recommended. I don't have a list of all of his jobs.
Just wondering how many of these more.
Well, I unfortunately, Steve does cite another case which we did give the applicant relief. It was the same thing. They, took a very broad. We took a broad interpretation of relying on a licensed survey. That is not the intent.
Was
in
that
my
the
opinion.
Fire Spring project?
Yeah.
Because in Monomoy, we did not give relief for a pool when it was constructed into the setback. We asked the abutter to try and, the Benedictus, I think it was, 4 or 5 years ago.
There was also a Maddox Shannon, was
Brandon?
one 3 years ago.
What was it, a pool or?
It was a pool, same story contractor
I do vaguely remember that as well. I mean, the idea was to ultimately try to put some teeth into the bylaw and say, don't do this unless you get a licensed professional to do it for you. Not, again, that you just pick up a piece of paper and wing it. So
Yeah.
I'm having a little trouble with that aspect of granting the relief, pinning it on that.
I think everybody should hire surveyors and lawyers to avoid these problems, but not everybody does.
At least the surveyor.
At least the surveyor, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I can look past this one to a certain degree, but I do have a problem with fair play going out there and, you know, doing what he wants to do, and then coming back and asking for forgiveness
Well,
via
it's, yeah,
an
it's,
attorney. So at what point are we going to kind of make an example so these guys kind of get it? I'm sure if we said, go back.
we could
now,
start now.
Yeah, you can start fixing this.
I will admonish him, I assure you.
Yeah.
The issue here, you know, that they looked at, well, the lot states, you know, we have the survey, let's measure off that. Was that reasonable? Yes. Did it work? Not even close. So,
Well, it might have been a reasonable game plan, but it wasn't the intent of the bylaw. So they're not looking at the bylaw saying, okay, we're reasonably relying on a licensed survey. They're just saying we don't have a building permit. We didn't bother getting HTC approval.
yeah.
Let's build this arguably where we want. We'll just tape measure it, and they don't even give themselves enough wiggle room to cover their errors. So,
Well, the problem we have, you know, unfortunately, is the homeowners hire the contractor to install this thing, and they assume, or they understand that a permits are being sought and issued because this person is in the trade and in the business. And, you know, I don't know if he forgot or didn't know or whatever, but, you know, they're standing there with their arms out going, what do you mean there's no permit? What do you mean it's in the setback? You know, they're having a heart attack too. I think that in this particular situation, it's a little onerous to hold that owner at, you know, to this level of having to spend $130,000 to move a tennis court that's a relatively minor impact, given the fact that it does qualify for a special permit.
well, you know.
I'm sure it does.
I'm not sure it does either. So I guess that's the sticking point.
It could.
I mean, maybe this sends a message that these companies need to get their errors and omissions insurance in place, you know, or eat some of this $90,000.
Yeah, I think you
So
should
the-
read the whole thing, but
Right, yeah.
that's just my take.
How high is the fence?
I
Usually about 10 feet.
Yeah, it's over 6.
Sure.
And it is I think, I mean, the interesting thing about it is if it were a house, we'd probably be even, you know, I don't know, more inclined because you'd say, oh, it's so expensive to move it. But it is just a game court, basically a fence. You could, I'm sure, move that fence and still play tennis there because it only has to move. It's hard to tell from this drawing, but anyway, anybody in the audience want to talk about this? No.
It's not just the fact that there's a fence in the setback that makes it
Well, I'm
the
saying,
court itself.
no, I know that, but I mean, you could make the argument that the court is the playing surface of the tennis court, not the surrounding area. Steve didn't make that argument, I'm not necessarily making the argument, but.
I think Marcus would take the position that the whole thing.
Well, I agree, but, I mean, that's another tweak of the bylaw that might need to be made, you know, a real better definition of a playing court. Because if the clay surface, for instance, and this drawing is inadequate to determine this, is 25 feet from the edge, more than recommend, or more than a typical.
Well, the clay would run all the way right to the fence.
No, I know that, but we don't know the dimension of that
Yeah.
as it relates to the actual court.
It's 12 feet on some specs that are in the estimate.
Well, they are outlining in the estimate the typical. They didn't say, did they say that's what's there now? You want to show that to me?
No, they did not say that, but it's
No, they give you the typical.
right.
All I'm saying is that it's in, we can't determine what this is.
I tend to doubt that it could be typical extra large service.
But we have no idea, we can't tell, because you didn't, again, provide all I asked for was a little drawing saying that if we went to the lot line, here's the tennis court, the actual court, and here's the sidelines. So I still can't determine it from this.
It's a regulation court. There's no reason to build this tennis court extra large. It's not like any
They're all a standard 60 by 120.
It's the kind of thing that's only built standard sizes.
Well, again, I totally disagree with you. The guy could have wanted more, an area to sit
They could have.
on the side with a bench in more than 12 feet, a little, water station or something. And I would also, so it would have been nice to have that information. That's all. Again, we don't have that information, even though we asked for it about 4 months ago.
Well, what I was told is that there's a 12-foot variance, a 12-foot difference between the line and the fence, and the edge of the pavement, whatever the surface is. It's not pavement. I did not go out and measure it.
Well, you could have gotten a licensed surveyor to figure it out,
Could have.
to actually give us a measurement, instead of relying on this plan. Buy a licensed surveyor.
That line is what I was the asphalt.
I know, but he didn't delineate the actual court. Anyway, we don't have to spend too much more time on this one. How do we feel about it? You want to just put it to a vote, or want to discuss it some more, or?
There's not much to discuss
We've
on
given this kind of relief before, unfortunately. And it seems like we're going to continue to, because it continues to come at us.
I do kind of want to draw the line somewhere. Not on this case, but I do want to send a clear message. So if I see, I hate to single people out, but if I see Fair Play show up with another one of these, I'm definitely going to vote it down. And you can go to deal with an insurance company if you even have one in play. So I'll make a motion to approve the application as requested.
So grant the relief as requested, the special permit?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
All right.
All those opposed?
4 to 1.
4 to 1.
Thank you very much. Want to keep these?
No.
I'll learn more about tennis courts in 5 minutes.
All righty. Six Lily Street, well, we'll wait for Susan to come back.
Yeah, the hollow.
We ask her to come in, thank you. Oh no, 6 Lily is being continued, I can do that. So we don't have to do anything on that, right, Eleanor? No. Right, Eleanor. Okay. All right, so can I get a motion to continue 6 Lily Street LLC, file number 2416 to 11/10/16? Somebody want to second that?
I'll second.
Mark seconds it. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. All right, now we have to wait for Eleanor.
So much warmer in the hallway.
It is a little cool down here. It's not horrible, but it's cool. Did you eat both of those?
I think so. You really give me one?
Choice of either this one or this one.
Will you see if Eleanor's out there, Steve?
Yes.
Please? Okay. We're ready? Alan A. Shook, trustee, Ann F. Shook, Cupert, 45 Quidnet Road, file number 3216 for the applicant.
Good afternoon, Sarah Alger for the applicant. With me is the applicant, Alan Shook, his surveyor, Bob Emack, his caretaker, Whit Bourne, and his project manager, Ron Winters. This is an application to raise up a pre-existing non-conforming structure. The structure was the subject of zoning relief back in 1996 that allowed its reconstruction. It has a certificate of occupancy as a studio with bath, no heat on septic. It's used as kind of a beach cabana changing shack. It's down on the beach in Quidnet. I want to just give you a couple of photographs. One is an old pre-72 aerial, which is a little hard to see, but you can see the shack on the beach, as well as another shack that was removed at the time that the prior relief was granted. The second is a map showing the flood zone elevations. And the third is a photograph of the existing cottage and then a mock-up done by the architect of the cottage as raised.
Yeah, we have all those.
Do you?
But if you want to give us paper copies, feel
I
free.
mean, I don't know that you have this.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know that I sent this one.
Okay.
But anyway,
Feel
I'll
free.
give you these paper copies just in case.
Sarah, does the project have HDC approval?
Yes, it does. We went to the HDC, and we have an application pending at the Conservation Commission. The reason that we're here is the level of Sacagawea Pond has been pretty consistently rising over the past few years, and in the winters now, the water comes up underneath this cottage, and while it's not actually flooding inside the building, it is coming up against the floor joists and pretty significantly impacting the underside, and we anticipate that that will only get worse. Given the zone that we're in, we should be going to elevation 9, but we're right kind of abutting the zone that would require elevation 10. If we raise the building, the proposed 3 feet will be at the recommended elevation 10. That will get us out of the flood zone, but won't put the top of the structure above the existing coastal bank. We looked at attempting to move the structure out of the setback by pushing it to the west. Unfortunately, given the conditions on the ground, particularly the bank that's there, the heavily vegetated bank, the only way to go west would be to move the cottage closer to the water, which is something the Conservation Commission isn't going to allow. We also have no ability to move this structure out. We'd have to demo it, given its location below the bank. The proposal is to lift it up and to actually build up the existing foundation, which is a combination of block and concrete posts, right? Piers. So we won't be demolishing or removing the existing foundation. We've had an engineer look at it, and we've been told that we can actually use the existing foundation. All of the work is going to be done by carrying by hand all the equipment, et cetera, down the stairs to the beach, and then doing the work by hand on the beach. The only other handout I have is just a GIS or assessor's map that's marked up with the abutters. The Seegers at 11 and the Gardners at 3 were two of the most impacted abutters have both sent letters in favor of the application. There were initially a number of letters, I think, before we supplemented our package, a number of letters in opposition, and I don't know if there's anyone here to speak in opposition, but I'm sure if there is, you will hear from them.
Thank you.
I don't know if you have questions, but everyone's here to answer anything you might need to know.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
Yeah, does the applicant own another cottage on the pond?
No,
There's not another little cottage down there?
it was demoed.
There were two when we acquired the property in 1993.
Yeah.
One to the west was removed.
The one to the west?
Which
was
you can
removed.
see in that aerial, old aerial photo.
That was a condition.
Correct. That was a condition of the prior approval.
20 years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Did, I'm just a little confused. 20 years ago, I don't see any condition that you had to get rid of the bathroom that was in it. So that wasn't part of that,
No.
okay, the decision? All right.
Yeah, because one of the abutters mentioned it.
Yeah, I was around that. I didn't sit on this, but I, for some reason, thought that, and maybe I'm probably misspeaking, but, because I don't see it anywhere.
No, there was no condition requiring the removal. It was the kitchen facilities
Yeah,
that
I
had
see
to be
that.
removed.
Yeah, I think there might have been some misunderstanding.
Okay.
Here, I'll give you a copy of the CO so you have that for your file as well.
You're not proposing any interior changes or use changes. It still remains.
Same use, same interior. The only change that we're proposing, other than the lift up, is the addition of the set of stairs to the west, which are now necessary to gain access to the property once it's raised up. The 440 square feet of ground cover remains the same.
Okay. Any other questions at this point?
One question for Sarah. When is this before the Concom?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday?
I think that's.
I'd be very interested to see what they have to say about this project.
I assume you had approval for the plywood.
I don't believe so. I think that was sort of a stopgap measure.
So maybe that won't be part of the application?
It's definitely not part of the application, and it's not anything that we intend to continue.
Okay. So, should we hear from anybody else in the audience?
One more picture.
Go ahead.
Here's the picture of the cottage that was removed and the old cottage before it was fixed up under this 19...
So is there currently a bathroom in this cottage?
Yes,
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And that gets pumped up to a septic system?
correct.
And what's going to happen to the pump? And where's, I mean, what's,
Pump is outside.
well, I know it is.
Tight tank?
No, it's an ejector pump.
Huh.
Wouldn't the top of that pump be underwater now, or will be soon enough?
I really don't, it's kind of up a little bit next to the staircase there. That's-
Well, you've got a gravity sewer line coming out of the cottage, goes into the pump chamber. So the invert in the pump chamber is a couple of feet below the bathroom level, which to me looks like it would be at the beach level or lower than that. Well, I guess Concom will figure that out.
Yeah, I would think that would be, should be part of their application at Concom. You probably will have, I mean, if you're moving the building out of the flood plain.
Soon enough,
Arguably,
that pump's gonna be in the pond.
you would want to move the pump tank full of poop out of it.
Supposedly should be a water tank.
Yeah, supposedly, but I'm just saying. I don't think that's a big deal, though, do you? But, okay. Anybody else before we go to the audience? For now? No. Anybody else? Anybody here to speak to this? Go ahead, sir. Use the term.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Kevin Dale. I'm a local attorney. I represent the Director Butters Bill and Laura Taft Paulson. And I just want to make some observations and raise some concerns here, because I think this is a Solomonic task that you have in front of you. It's not just approving the raising of a cottage. It's looking at the relationship between what's proposed in the neighborhood, the Satchka Pond neighborhood, and the pond. I mean, first and foremost, this cottage directly on the beach is anomalous to the pond. There's one other, but there aren't many. And it's obvious it's right on the beach. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Paulson care about their neighbor and understand why he wants to raise the cottage, because of the expansion of the pond and the water problem. That's clear. But they're also concerned about what that will do to the neighborhood, raising it up 3 feet, making it more prominent, this anomalous cottage, in the view line of other neighbors. And most importantly, they're concerned about what this may do to the pond and how it may affect the pond. Now, as long as I've known this board, I guess 35 years, the policy has been, before you apply and come in for zoning relief, you obtain HDC approval, which the applicant has done, and you obtain Conservation Commission order of conditions, which the applicant hasn't done yet, but wants to do. I think in this case, more than any other, that my memory anyway, before you do anything, you should review the final order of conditions of the Conservation Commission. You've raised questions about it already. It's a critical matter here, especially given the fact, as Mr. Thayer pointed out, there's a bathroom and a pump right next to the pond. So it seems to me it's difficult to balance the interests of the neighborhood and the applicant. But fundamentally, there's a context here. It's not just an applicant asking for relief. It's an applicant asking for relief in the context of a neighborhood that's going to be affected by it. So I leave it to you to make those decisions. But one thing I would ask is that you defer any decision until you have the final order of conditions and you can review it. And require that just as you require from every other applicant. I mean, there's no reason why that notice of intent wasn't filed until September 30th, when this application came in a couple months beforehand. But again, I'm not here to oppose it. I understand why the applicant wants the relief. But I think that this board, if it grants the relief, should be careful, should mitigate the effect of the relief on the pond and the neighbors best way you can. And perhaps that means requiring a condition that puts natural plantings around the foundation of this raised cottage. And maybe it means requiring removal of the bathroom, because I simply don't see how that can be a safe, healthy compartment in that cottage when it's that close to the pond. That may be a Conservation Commission concern, but it's important to raise it here. So I'm here to raise concerns on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Paulson. I ask you to be judicious, as you normally are, and careful. And if you grant the relief, do it in a very careful way. Perhaps it means not allowing an expansion of the footprint to include a porch. Maybe stairs are necessary, but I'm no architect, but I look at the HTC plans and I think it's a pretty elaborate and formal porch facing the pond. Those are things that I think you can consider. I don't see any harm in protecting the building. In a perfect world, it should be taken off the beach, but it's been there, it's legally protected. But I ask you to use your good judgment and your discretion if you're going to fashion relief that's affirmative, special permit relief, and certainly wait until November or December until you see what the Conservation Commission does before you act. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing I don't understand, Kevin, you spoke about the porch. The porch is there.
There.
Already.
The stairs aren't there.
The stairs are, I arguably need to be put there so you can get up to the new 3-foot level, but
They
I
don't
think,
necessarily have to go back towards the pond.
Yeah, they could
Come
face
back.
Yeah.
the other way.
sure, makes some sense as well.
So it's right, it's a set of stairs and this little porch leading into the secondary door there.
I mean, I think they
That's
could come off the
currently
back.
not there.
but-
I agree.
But how do we feel about the, Mr. Dale brings up a good point. We generally like to have other relief in place. So the Concom could totally change what's going on, and so making our relief somewhat moot.
May I respond to a few of those points?
Sure.
Okay, first, I want to give you these pictures because I'm not sure they were in the package. They may have been, but they're show photographs of structures all along the pond edge. This is not the only cottage that's down on the pond. There are other cottages, there are other structures, there are other sheds, there are also other houses. So I want to have those in the record.
The few that I know of are all right on the beach. Are there others that are?
Yeah. I think Mr. Dale called this anomalous. Well, to the extent that it's anomalous because it's historic. It's been there for a long, long time. The Norcross family used.
Was this Alan Norcross's home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It goes back to the 1960s and predates virtually almost every other structure within it.
Thank you.
I also want to point out that the direct
Excuse me,
abutter.
He probably did not have a pump going up.
No,
the hill.
but Steve Scannell was still around then.
That's
Good
right.
point.
That's right. I want to point out that the direct abutter to this particular piece of the property is not Mr. Dale's client. Mr. Dale's client is a direct abutter to Mr. Shook's property, but further to the north. The direct abutter to the part of this property where this particular structure is are the gardeners at 11 Sacajah, and they're the people here.
Can you show me? Yes, please.
Yeah. So, here's the cottage.
Yep.
Studio. This is Seeger, sorry. They're at 11 Sacajah. This is Paulson back here, and this is Gardner.
Okay.
So it says Seeger, and this is all
Sure.
Mr. Shook. So he is a direct abutter to Shook, but it's Seeger who's the direct abutter to
Can I borrow it? All right, so this line is somewhat like this. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not on there. Okay. And,
Is that in the butter right there?
yeah, that's who owns. I know who does, but
To Benedictus?
yeah,
That's Danielle De Benedictis.
and she's not here and not represented by you or Mr. Dale. Okay.
No. I just want to remind the board that there is no requirement under our bylaw where you go first. We happened to go to the HDC first. There was no evil intent in the order in which these things were filed. I happened to be able to literally throw together a zoning application in August. We weren't as lucky on the HDC and Concom, and that's how the timing occurred and why we continued from the previous, why we weren't here in September was because we wanted to go to the HDC first, but there's no evil intent in the order in which we made the application, and I don't think our bylaw requires that one application be filed or acted on first. I think your standard here is this substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure? And given that we're picking it up and moving it above the floodplain, which would be required if we were doing 50% value of work to the property, I think it's a completely reasonable application and one that you should approve. The HDC has already taken into consideration the impacts to the scenic and aesthetic views and Quidnet, how it looks from the pond, how it will look once it's raised up. And I would urge that you grant this. We can deal with whatever environmental concerns there are when we get to the Concom.
Can I just add?
Can you do me a favor? I know you are, but can you identify yourself for the tape?
Oh, I'm sorry, Alan Shook, S-H-U-C-H. We've owned the property since August of '93. The studio isn't visible from any of these homes above the bank. And I think you have a Photoshop in front of you in the stack. Once it's raised 3 feet, it still won't be visible.
Yeah.
And in terms of the number of the homes along Sackville Road, as I indicated a few moments ago, the studio predates many of those homes, but a number, including the Paulsons, have doubled or tripled or more in size in recent years, getting back some 10 years. So when one speaks about the context, the historic significance, the quaint nature of Quidnet, I'd argue that the studio is more in keeping with the history than many of these standard homes.
Thank you.
Is this the Photoshop? So this is a real?
Yeah.
Oh. I was wondering.
Yeah, so that
This
one's
is
how it
this
exists.
is how it is now,
And that's what the HTC.
and that's what it looks like after.
I have a question for Bob. Bob, Sarah in her presentation said that this is in a zone that should go up to nine, but right on the edge of where 10 is, 10 feet. Can you sort of elaborate on that?
It's in zone that elevation 8 is the flood zone. The building code would require you to go up a foot higher than that. And so, but flood zone elevation 9 is right along the edge of the pond. So that I think it's reasonable. And that would require elevation 10 for a school.
I haven't,
Okay.
but I can't really. I mean, arguably, if you're in elevation, the floodplain, the flood area of 8, you should go to 9, not ask for 10. I mean, just because.
It would be required to go to 9.
Right, okay. Just want to be clear on that.
So you're asking for a foot higher in elevation than what would be normally required?
Right. And the foot is already built in to 8 to 9.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it used to be, I believe, that the floorboards had to be it, so your whole undercarriage could get soaked, which made no sense, of course. But
Right. We chose the 3 feet because of our proximity to the zone that requires 10, because we don't want to have to do this again, and because a raise of 3 feet, we're still below the top of the bank, so we're not impacting the views of any people to our north.
well, I think the pond. I'm not a pond expert by any means, but just anecdotally driving by it for seemingly 100 years, it does go up and down. And in the winter, it definitely. But there seems to be a finite point as to I don't think it's a global warming issue where it's going to its level is going to continue to go up. As long as they continue to open the pond and drain it every year. So I'm not sure I'm buying the fact that we need to go extra just
Well,
because
let's put it this way.
someday
It
it may
didn't
be
used
higher.
to do what it does now, and now it does.
Oh, I bet it did. You know, and the pictures show the wind just driving it up there. I mean, the water level is not there.
Speak to that.
I'm with more of a caretaker. I've been working with Alan for about 22 years. The past 2 years has been absolutely dramatic out there. And you can see it along Holtus Road, other side of the pond. I called the DPW and they added large stones along there because the road was starting to get undermined. There's just been a dramatic increase in the water level in the pond the past couple of years, all the ponds for that matter. And this seems to be part of the trend that's starting to occur. And call it what you may, global warming or whatnot. It's just been a dramatic increase.
I would agree with that. I mean, in my previous life, I did a lot of work out there. And I used to watch the wetlands in Squam, and I watched that pond go up. And every year, it seemed to get wetter around there in the pond than it used to rise.
Okay. All right. So what do we want to do? We want to wait for Concom? We want to vote?
I'm willing to support this application, but I do think that we should see what the Concom has to say and have the applicant come back and vote on it then.
Mr. Chairman, may I be very brief?
Absolutely.
I want to apologize to the applicant and to my colleague Sarah. If anything I said was interpreted by them to be contentious or adversarial on this, my clients gave me explicit instructions not to do that, to be neighborly, and not to oppose the relief. And if I came across as someone who was oppositional, adversarial, contentious, I apologize. That's not my intention. My intention was not to ascribe to Sarah evil intent for not filing with the Conservation Commission sooner. It's very important that Mr. Shook knows my clients want to be good neighbors. They don't oppose this project. All I want to emphasize, all I'm asking you to do is to be careful. This is a delicate project. It's not a slam dunk. It's on a very fragile wetland resource area. It should be done prudently, carefully, with the right conditions. It doesn't mean to say that the Paulsons are against it. And I don't think it does any good in these hearings or anywhere else to set neighbors against neighbors. So that's not what I'm doing. So I just want to be clear, and again, I apologize.
Thank you. Mark?
I want to address this to Bob because he'd probably be involved in it, but I imagine there's going to be a very, very strict construction protocol on this project.
Yes, it's all by hand.
I'm sure there's a lot of barriers and other things that are going to be put up, and there's going to be monitoring and all of that stuff going on with this sensitive project. But that will fall under the Concom jurisdiction, not us. They'll dictate all of that. DEP will dictate that.
I propose we continue till next month. We'll have the opportunity to hear what Concom's comments are. And in the meantime, I would also probably tell the applicant that if they do, for some reason, find an issue with the pump system in place for the bathroom, that they explore other options just as a contingency plan. On that note, I'll make the motion to continue until next month.
I have a question on the motion before
Go ahead.
second it. I think that's a good idea to continue to next month, but do you want to make your final decision on this after the Concom makes it their decision.
Yes.
So it may not, it may have to be continued. I don't know how fast the Concom.
Yeah, I suspect it
Yeah.
will be, but
May I ask you just one question from the board?
Sure.
I don't have any objection to continuing until November, but I would like to know if there's additional information that you would like to have for your file from a zoning perspective. I'd be happy to provide it. I just don't want to show up in November and find out there was something I did or didn't have that you wanted.
I've heard enough personally, and I am willing to support it, but I think that there's some benefit to waiting till there may be a benefit to you too, because if you have to come back here because of something the Concom
Right.
put in their decision.
It's sort of hard to imagine, only because we have nowhere to go with this building. We go up and we go back down. We're not going to go left, right, forward, or back. It's up and then it's down. But I'm happy to come back.
Does Concom have the authority to ask them to remove the bathroom, or to not allow the?
I don't know.
I don't know yet.
Well, maybe a tight tank if they decide.
okay, so,
The only thing I'd like to see is a certificate of appropriateness from the HDC as part of the file.
okay.
So
Sarah,
we know
did you
the
hear
height.
that? Go ahead, Mark.
If you could provide us with a copy of the certificate of appropriateness for the approval of this project today, that would be great.
Okay. Yep, that's fine.
I would be willing to support it. I'd be very, very, very leery of the existing pump chamber you have in there, what's going to happen to that during the construction process, and then what happens in the future. And I would suggest that you, depending on what Concom does, I think you should test that thing for water tightness prior to hooking up to it again. I think you should test it for water tightness after you hook it up, and I think there should be a yearly testing requirement on that system to make sure that
Maintenance schedule. Maintenance agreement.
Sure. I mean, it's not something I'm not sure we can require, but
No.
I think it's something that it really is something that should be done, because these things leak.
Right.
Whether it's required or not.
Sometimes they leak. It could be leaking now, and you would have no idea.
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
If Karen's,
Mr. Dale has handed me
Hold on
very
one second.
kindly the certificate of appropriateness, so I'll give that to you.
The love is, I'm just feeling it today. I mean, I'm not sure I can handle it,
Something
though.
in the air here.
Jeez.
if Karen's
I have
motion-
one other request for November. We're trying to do this work before the winter, which is going to make November a very tight situation for us. Would you be willing, if you're thinking of supporting relief, if I brought a decision to the November meeting for signature? Because the 21-day appeal period is going to probably kill us for this year.
The only reason I don't feel all that sympathetic is because you could have filed for the Concom months ago. And I'm not, again, implying
Well,
that there was any
we
nefarious
could've- we
activity
could've,
going on.
but we
then all of a
could've-
sudden it becomes a crisis.
Well,
So anyway, having said that,
you
bring
know how
whatever
long
you
it
want.
takes-
and-
We
You know
get a
how
chance
long
to
it
look
takes
at
to
it prior
pull
to the
together
meeting?
these things? Yeah, I can circulate it.
Fine with it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Whatever.
I don't disagree with
Whatever.
your thinking.
I mean, you
and Kevin both have lunch at the same place or something.
yeah, I'm going to editorialize on that maybe later, but
So if it's appropriate, I will second Karen's motion.
okay. Is there, the motion's been made and seconded. Did anybody else in the audience before we move on want to talk about this? No. So, any further discussion on the board? No. So, who's voting? The regular members? And, I guess, so.
I'll vote.
You'll vote, yeah. So, Jim, you're sitting this one out on the vote side. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
So also here in November, I hope?
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Everybody except me?
No, Jim did not
Jim
sit
and
either.
I did not sit on.
November 10th, I think. Okay, so that's done? I believe I'll be here.
Little OC.
Crazier.
Edward,
Yeah. Don't tell
can we
me.
take a break between us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And Ed,
Yeah.
just a little side note, for some reason, if I get called out and I'm not here in November, I guess Jim could.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's two of us.
Yeah, I think anybody, it can continue. It's just, are we off mic for a sec? Probably still on.
Probably still on.
I mean, I just love it.
She won't, she'll just start sooner. Not right, so instead of waiting over the and then waiting for us to start. It starts 20 days, whatever it is from then. What? Yeah, I'm starting to really.
You got your muffler on.
Are you really?
Crank it up.
Next time there's like an HVAC guy in the audience, let's ask him about why it's so cold and what we can do.
I'm wondering if it has something to do with the fact that it's geothermal, and the geothermal just doesn't have any clue when it's hot or cold out. That's my theory.
I think that's what
It's
someone said before.
unintelligent Geothermal.
Right.
You know,
Right. But that seems like a waste of.
You can't adjust. No.
Because it's supposed to know better than we do.
all that trim is all
The system is supposed to know better.
I didn't even know there were so many people. I didn't notice that.
What about those pictures? Story about those tanks.
And that map.
My mother-in-law had a tank and it's for a garden project.
Oh, there's no requirement someone photoshops to put business Photoshop.
that thing was growing like a champ.
You're lying on a photo. It's not real.
Yeah, I know, that is a good point. Should say on it, proposed or something. No, she should, not you.
The
I'm not
Photoshop
saying
one
you.
really confused me because it didn't say Photoshop.
Yeah, that's not on
Because I'm
you.
looking at that, I'm like, it looks fine, I don't understand.
Yeah, what's the beef?
The other pictures are that are taken on a hurricane, right? And you don't.
Ah, it was gross. I would also just like to comment that Mr. Dale's apology reminded me of another politician recently.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Not Donald.
I didn't either. Okay, are we ready? We're back. Let's do this. Let's get out of here. Harvey C. Jones, trustee, 8 Old North Ward, nominee trust, 8 Old North Ward, file number 3516 for you.
Good afternoon. Whitney Gifford representing Mr. Jones. With me is Mickey Rowland, who is the architect. There has been previous relief granted back in '05 when this entire structure was lifted so the underlying pier could be rebuilt and it was replaced. The applicant is a pre-existing non-conforming situation inasmuch as the footprint of the house is basically the footprint of the lot. It is extending out over the water sheet of Nantucket Harbor. The proposed project would take on the east elevation a exterior lattice wall and make that lattice wall a real wall and allow for increase in the interior space behind that lattice wall. The footprint will not change as far as the amount of the house that's above the deck that is the pier, and the appearance from the outside should also likewise be unchanged. We are seeking relief to allow the project to proceed.
Okay, that it?
That's it.
What's there now? Just porch? Nothing? Just the wall and the walkway?
It's a walkway. It's a covered porch, and the lattice protects the outer perimeter.
Okay. Do you have any comment?
This building's already been lifted and renovated 10 years ago or something, right?
Yeah, in '05.
We don't typically give relief for more ground cover.
Mm-hmm.
It is not ground cover now. It's walkway. I frankly don't remember the last time we did.
There's Matt.
Absolutely.
The bylaw was amended, and you actually recently granted permit, maybe even two, if I'm not mistaken. One was on Pulling Mill Road for an increase in pre-existing non-conforming ground cover. If in the staff report I cite the particular portion of bylaw where certain findings have to be made.
That was the generator.
That was the enclosed generator. That's it.
That wasn't living space. That was definitely
It was the generator.
Section of the bylaw,
Right.
it's only 2 years old, and really nobody came to you the first year it was in effect. It only just sort of surfaced.
Let me reread that. Again, not only was it a generator, I'm pretty sure we conditioned it to never be
Living space.
used for living space. Definitely good. I did read this. It doesn't meet C because it goes right to the lot line now. It's not on the lot line. I mean, then the living space would go right up to the lot line. Now it's just porch. So I don't necessarily think it meets the criteria, but and I think it's fairly consistent, but it's not 100% consistent. How's everyone else doing?
Vicki, is a lattice work screen essentially open to weather? I mean, wind perforates through it and
This is a very tight lattice that's probably,
2x2, something like that?
it's even tighter than that. It's a narrow board, and it's only about spaced about 3/4 of an inch. That's photograph sections. So it's really tight. And also on the inside of the lattice.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
There's plexiglass. I don't know how old the plexiglass is.
That's why I asked the question. I really wanted to know if this is a real, truly enclosed thing, or if the lattice work was going to be there and wind was going to perforate through it.
Granted, it's not screening, but screening it looks enclosed.
So therefore, the increase in ground
Photograph
cover.
it backwards. Yeah.
Right, so it already constitutes ground cover.
Not yet. Well, I mean, it should. But
It should.
It should,
It's been acting-
because it's been there.
acting like that
Right.
since
Right,
Because it has the plexiglass.
right.
and
How
it's
long has it been in
enclosed.
place?
The plexiglass?
Any
It's hard to
idea?
say. It could be 5
2005?
I don't know. Maybe when they looked at the building.
Well, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Been there over 10 years, whatever the case may be.
Well, 10 years unpermitted, probably.
You know, they just changed the rules on that last month, the state level. That if something has gone 10 years unpermitted and there's not a lawsuit in place after 10 years, you can apply for other permits, including special permits and variances. That include that work that was done illegally over 10 years ago.
So I can build a structure on my property right now without benefit of permit.
Correct.
Wait 10 years.
Well, you might, if nobody files
Until
anything,
Marcus dies.
or including the building inspector, for 10 years.
Yeah, obviously. Wait
No, but
10
you couldn't come back here in the way the law read 12 years later and apply for a special permit on something that was illegally built.
Is it germane to this?
No. They also extended the life of a special permit, 3 years.
Oh, it's good. Info. Anyway, did this, how do we feel about this?
I don't have an issue. I'm not sure I'm sitting on this, but that's my
Well,
opinion.
and everybody's sitting on this. It's who we voting on. To me, it feels a little bit like Stone Creek. The board got that approved, and I hope, and now we want to throw it in. Oh, it's there already. I'm not
Been there.
that.
The original.
The porch has been here for decades.
Oh, the porch is not part of the renovation.
Oh, no,
I mean,
the porch has been there for a long time. Right.
little side porch.
The belief in 5 is literally just picking it up, redoing the pier and putting it down.
I was not trying to imply that there was any, whatever. I'm going to apologize.
No evil intent.
Apologies blossoming.
I'm not going to give you a piece of paper that you need for your application.
This is anomalous as well.
Absolutely.
And what? Solemnitic.
Salmonitic.
Solomonic.
Solomon.
Solomon.
What's that game? Words with friends.
Yeah, that's too
Brother
loud.
Council.
So all we're looking to do is enclose this side porch. Nothing on the water side porch?
No, that's no change. It's not even the full porch, the plan shows most of that porch, but it's space.
And it's going to get enclosed how? I mean, because these plans we're looking at aren't proposed, these are existing, right?
They're,
There should be the HDC.
they're stamped June 2016.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, I'm not sure I understand it. Well,
The appearance won't change at all, so probably you're looking at an elevation that would look the same now as it does.
The lattice, look at page,
90, right?
what, either 88.
yeah, no, I see it, I just,
Or, yeah, 90 shows sort of a cross or
The infill.
Little infill shed roof thing going on, right?
existing lattice. And if they could get them all on the side, then I'd have to have to do it. No thing else.
I don't think I have a problem with it because it already looks like it's, like, for all intents and purposes for the outside, it already looks like it's part of the structure, like the ground cover, and that it has this plexiglass. I mean, I get that it wasn't permitted and whatever, but it seems like it's been there for a long time.
I don't know.
What's that?
Is the plexiglass on the inside of this?
I think that's the storage thing. think.
There's an open air storage, like trash bin.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
The roof area, you can see past
If you look at the floor plan, you'll see clearly the hashed-in section where it's being infilled.
Yeah.
Now, on that hashed-in section, and that's deck now, and that's deck that's supported by piles? It's exterior, it's covered porch, and that deck is supported by piles.
Yeah, it's like a walkway.
It goes out to, the underlying deck goes out to the edge of the building.
Do you have Concom approval for this? You'd have to go through Concom for this, wouldn't you?
I checked with Concom, and they said since we're not doing anything to the underlying support, we're not changing any of the supporting piers or the size of the deck or anything, that we did need relief.
I think they'd want some kind of buffer along the property for debris in the water, just to be able to collect anything that may come out. Or maybe there's
The
all
rear
interior
deck
stuff.
is going to get bigger, right? It's going to get wider. The rear deck is going to get wider.
No, that's no change at all. On
Why
the
is
water
it-
side?
Why is
This
it?
that doesn't make any sense, Mickey, not on this plan.
It's a railing system, isn't it?
You have a rear deck here that goes to there, which is that point right there. So that's going to get changed,
Well, you're on the second floor here.
right?
Okay, that comes out, it actually overhangs, it ends there.
This is the lower deck, this
So
is the
it's a
upper
lower
Yeah.
deck. The second floor
So
deck.
this is the lower deck.
Correct.
Why is that?
Here's the upper
five?
deck. Because we
Just the
changed
railing?
this, yeah, that's for the HTC, we changed the style of railings.
Just the railing.
Oh.
Used to be like a front door.
It was a
Okay.
crossbuck, wasn't it? So-
No, it wasn't a crossbuck, but
Okay.
it's just open.
Okay, all right.
Huh.
Okay, well, unless you guys want to stay here a while, what do you think?
I just want to look at the large, final again.
I'm just inclined to swing around coverage. You came to us with a bigger lot. Anybody else who has some ground cover, other than, again, the generator.
Do we know what the resulting ground cover ratio is?
Mr. Emack is still out in the lobby. I can pose that question to him very quickly, but
It's in the application somewhere.
So it's under 71.
It's about 40 square feet, roughly, I'm not sure exactly.
Where's your addendum?
Well, in ours,
No, it's not in the staff report.
no?
I don't see it.
What did you say, Maggie, it was 40%?
No,
Oh, wait, sorry.
It's about 40 square feet probably.
Yeah, it's,
So it's increasing, it says it's increasing the pre-existing non-conforming ground cover ratio at 71%.
That's the existing.
Right. So I was wondering, and it says the resulting ground cover ratio is consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood, so it's just,
Well, if it's 71 now, you're adding 40 to 620, it's roughly seven.
761. Excuse me, 661.
Well, actually, it's an 877 square foot lot, so it's roughly a 5%. Roughly.
And-
75, I don't know.
How many?
75?
percent?
Oh, yeah, total.
and the lots around here, pretty much, it looks like the structures are mostly, most of the lot is the structure.
right. In some cases, the structure is hanging out over the lot line or the butter.
Yeah.
As is in this case.
So I think it meets 1 and 2.
We already got some free ground, so somebody else's property.
Depends on the size.
Well, this is chapter 91 license, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think C doesn't apply to this situation. It's conforming to other dimensional requirements, because these lots are unique. I mean, it's, I mean, the bylaw's there, so.
The bylaw, in my opinion, whoever comes to us, by the way, and says, argues against that, it's another crazy bylaw.
Well, I think if it, I think if this same situation was not on the wharf, on the water, like, I don't think I would agree with it, but I think because it's.
Well, I think any applicant would come in here and say,
Yeah, it's unique.
Or I have 3 acres on below my ground cover, but I want to go over, it's a big lot, it really doesn't bother anybody, and, so what? Why should I comply with zoning? Just because, it doesn't bother me.
But I think that's a different situation. I think, in my mind, that's different because they have flexibility in other ways, or they have, I mean, this has no space.
Well, they don't have any flexibility with regard to ground cover.
No.
That's the point. You buy something, this is what you get. And obviously you can come there.
It can be a little different in that it's already covered in nearly enclosed towards.
Yeah.
Well, but that doesn't make any sense, because I could, again, go back to my 3-acre piece of property that has 4,000 square feet of roofed over porch. And it's already underground. What's the difference? I'll just enclose it. It's not going to bother anybody.
But I would say the guy with the 3-acre thing that's like, oh, it doesn't bother him. Well, but that ground cover ratio would not be consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. I feel like
71% is already pretty hefty downtown.
But all of the lots that are right around it are all
consistent.
the same.
Well, if Whit wants to prove that, then maybe it'll be more fine. Or we can just vote it and hopefully you have 4 votes and we can move on. It's a beautiful day out there.
I mean, I'm usually right with you with the ground cover issue. I just think it's on. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm voting on this.
You do have the power to do that, don't you?
I have the power.
He does have the
If you were in a
power.
really generous mood, you tell Mr. Gifford that he can pick the board.
I think you should apologize for that.
To you or to me?
Everybody. The audience at home, they're
And
probably bored.
unfortunately, that was caught on video. But someday when I'm running,
Yeah, it's going to come back to bite you.
Dig this up.
You want to grope one of us?
I was going to say you and Billy
Calm
Bush
down.
can.
All right. Anyway, does anybody else have any comments?
No, I don't have an issue with this application. In fact, I just looked at it, and I actually sat on the first one 11 years ago, which kind of scared me a little bit. I agree with Susan's comments. I would put forth a motion to approve the application as requested, just because it's based on the uniqueness of this property, and Susan's argument that house on 3 acres definitely has more room to run than project this size. So.
Well, they don't really. I mean, they get much less ground cover on a percentage basis. And you're allowed 12%.
4%.
4%.
Right, but 4% on 3 acres is still going to be. I don't know the math off the top of my head. But I still think it's going to be much more.
It's really
space
not the
than
point. I mean, I used the 3 acres. It could have been 1 acre, it could have been a half acre, it could have been 5,000 square feet. The point is, you buy something, you get your ground cover, you should abide by it, in my opinion. So.
I still think a 5,000 square foot. I wouldn't agree. I might not agree with. I think just this is a special case.
Go.
What's the applicant applying for here?
Special permit.
Special permit.
Because it's already over ground cover.
Correct.
Existing
Explain.
Another
Who do you think
crazy bylaw
invented that?
If you're already over, just keep going. It's insane.
Because I would have thought this would be a variance, right?
No.
No, this is
I mean, I know that now we have.
See.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying it would make more sense.
It's an interesting bylaw, which it really gives Mr. Toole the ability to vote for it without breaking his golden rule, because it's not a variance that he's going for.
Oh, no doubt. It would give me the.
Yeah.
Probably not gonna. All right, let's vote and move on.
Okay,
So Karen made a motion,
I'll second.
Susan seconds. She's awful. She's not voting. And then, so the regular members will vote, just you, Michael, me, Susan, and you voted already. So, Jim, you want to vote on this one? All right. So those are the 5 voting members. Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I mean, I didn't say aye. It's just so low.
I think you got to apologize for that one.
Wait, so who said aye?
All right, let's redo that. All those in favor say aye. Okay. All those opposed say nay.
So Jeff, you did not.
I did not vote. Jim did.
Okay. That's it.
Okay.
Anything else that we
I
have?
don't know, I think that's tricky. Anybody with a covered porch is not going to come in here and increase my living area.
But that, unless they're over there, and in a 3-acre zone, that's
Well,
not applicable.
there are plenty of those situations.
No, but you can't,
Let's not talk.
Yeah, motion to,
Yeah, hold on. Is there any other business? No. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Did we set the meeting date for November?
Isn't it just regular?
Are we gonna be here, we hope? Okay, so Karen made, or you guys made him second the motion to adjourn?
I did, yep.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
aye.